Okay, Holly, we're live.
Hello, welcome back to Rebuilding Airports. My sincerest apologies for the technical issues, but we have now resolved them and we have saved the best to last. Good things are worth waiting for. So welcome to our final webinar session of the day on biometric technology, brought to you by our event partner, Amadeus. My name is Holly and I'm the editor of International Airports Review, and I'm here to introduce you to your moderator for this session, Salomon, CEO of European Association for Biometrics. Remember to submit your questions to our panelists using the live discussion box at the bottom of your screen. But for now, without further ado, I'll hand over to Jean. Jean, over to you.
Thank you very much, Holly. Hello, good afternoon, good day. Don't know exactly where in the world you are. It's a pleasure to be with you today, with a team of panelists I will introduce shortly. To make a long story short, we will try to respect the agenda, and we have decided amongst ourselves to make sure to control the duration of each of the presentation of our three speakers so that you have a chance to interact with us, because this is the goal. Now, using biometrics to increase passenger throughput and drive seamless journey is first of all the title and the topics. I would like to take a few seconds to thank on behalf of the EAB, the organization, for inviting me to do that. My pleasure will be to welcome our three panelists, and our three panelists are very, very qualified. Unfortunately, our first panelist from IATA, Kellyanne, could not attend. She took sick and could really not participate, so apologies for that. We will have the opportunity to welcome a fourth member of the team for Q&A. I'll introduce them shortly thereafter. But let me first introduce the first speaker, who is actually the CEO of the Los Angeles airports, and this is Justin Erbacci, and I'd like to hand him the floor for his presentation on the takeaways that he has observed with relation to the use of biometrics. Justin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, allowing me to participate in this meeting today. Just let me put the slide up here real quick. There we go. Hopefully you all can see that now. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this panel discussion today and with my fellow distinguished panelists. For those of you not familiar, Los Angeles World Airports, or LAWA, is the city department that oversees Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, and Van Nuys General Aviation Airport. The topic of biometrics is a very special interest to us here at Los Angeles World Airports. We've long been an innovator, and have learned how to leverage technology to help make our operations more efficient and to help enhance the passenger journey. And increasingly, we have looked to and leverage biometrics to help us to do this, and really to help us to create a more streamlined experience that increases the operational efficiency, enhances our security, and also enhances the guest experience. So the pandemic has brought on heightened attention really to the concept of touchless travel, which we all know is enabled through the use of biometrics. So we've tried to leverage that opportunity to accelerate some of our initiatives to utilize biometrics within the passenger journey here at LAX. The pandemic also helped to enhance the collaboration between the various groups who play a very important role in development of biometrics, and set more of an urgency to move forward the implementation of biometrics.
Justin, may I interrupt you for just a second? Could you please put the slideshow in presentation mode? That would probably increase the size and the visibility. Sorry for interrupting you. You can do that.
I thought that I had done that. Sorry about that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. It keeps going back. Sorry about that. The pandemic again has helped to really bring enhanced collaboration amongst the groups that are playing an important role in the development of biometrics. Again, set more of an urgency for us to be able to move forward with the implementation of biometric solutions. So we're we're hoping that this pandemic, one good thing out of it is going to accelerate our ability to bring biometrics into the airport setting. So our current use of biometrics includes automated self-boarding gates, the simplified arrival immigration process with our U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and a pilot that we have ongoing where we are using biometrics as part of a self-service bag drop for some of our international flights. So let me now just share some specific examples of these solutions. So our first delve into biometrics was in 2017 when we started working with the Customs and Border Protection, Vision Box, and several airlines on a biometric boarding solution, which leveraged the product that the Customs and Border Protection Agency put in place called Traveler Verification System. We were the first airport to use this technology to board live international flights using your face only. So the ability to go into these, sorry, get back here. So the idea was is that all you needed to do was look into the camera, and you would be authenticated from your identity and your itinerary, and then the gate would open and you would board the flight. And we did this with about a dozen airlines who were using this component. And we used this for almost a year and a half, up to 2 years. And we found that it was very significant in helping us to enhance and speed up the boarding process. So with this technology, we were boarding Airbuses, full Airbuses, in about 20 minutes. So which is about half of the typical time that it normally took us to board, that took airlines to board these aircraft. So it really was really a successful and an excellent pilot program where we first used the biometric technology. Leveraging this pilot, we now have implemented biometric boarding gates at all of the gates in our new midfield satellite concourse terminal, or Bradley West gates as we're calling them now. So all of the new 18 gates that we have there have these biometric units there, so people can board with their face only. These units are also flexible. If we have some domestic flights for which we don't have biometric solution yet, that they can just scan a boarding pass as well. So these these units are now in all of our gates in our new satellite concourse, and we're also in the process of retrofitting all of our international gates in Tom Bradley International Terminal, and we will, over the next year or so, fully implement these so that we have, for all of our international flights, automated boarding using biometrics. So that's for the departure process. Then for the arrival process, that we've worked with Customs and Border Protection, again, to implement the simplified arrival in all of our federal inspection stations at LAX. So all of our customs desks and our immigration desks have these cameras in place, and this allows CBP to use facial recognition to automate the passport checks, and it facilitates a much faster and a much more secure immigration process for international passengers who are arriving at LAX. So the arriving passengers basically look into the camera and they answer a few interview questions from a border officer in a completely touchless process, which obviously has become increasingly important as part of this COVID-19 pandemic. And safer for the passenger, safer for the agents as well. So by automating this part of the journey, and by moving, basically we remove the need for a secondary inspection, the new process is saving travelers as much as 45 minutes in getting through customs and immigration. So vastly improving their experience and getting them to the next part of the journey much quickly. In all of these solutions, there is always an opt-out provision if people don't want to use the biometrics, both for our boarding gates and in this immigration process. But we find that most passengers, a high majority of them, more than 90%, are choosing to avail themselves of the biometric solutions because they're just that much faster and easier for them. And then the final solution that we have ongoing right now is a pilot where we are using biometrics for an automated self-service bag drop system, and again at our Tom Bradley International Terminal. We installed these first in February of 2020, but obviously due to the global pandemic and the downturn of international traffic, we paused it for a while. However, we're bringing it back now, and we're looking forward to having the system working again very soon with our international passengers. We've done all the testing and we started to use it and it was working real well. But what the solution does is allows passengers just to approach the camera and look in, and then automatically they're able to print their boarding pass and or their bag tags, and they put their bag tags on the bag and drop it into the system there without any need for an agent to help them. So it's obviously making the passenger check-in process much faster and more automated and more secure because it's using the biometric. So those are the solutions that we have ongoing right now. We're looking at other solutions. Obviously, the important one for us is the security checkpoint. And we've conducted tests with both our Customs and Border Protection and our Transportation Security Agency to see how we can bring this system to a security checkpoint. And we're continuing to collaborate with them to see how we can do that. Obviously, all of our solutions now are for international travel because there's an automatic biometric enrollment with Customs and Border Protection. We now have to figure out in the U.S. anyway, how do we bring this to the domestic travel so we can start using biometrics as part of the domestic journey as well. So we look forward to continue to do a lot more work here, and again, hope that the pandemic has brought this to an enhanced position such that we can start getting biometrics and used more to help the passenger process be more efficient, more safe, and more customer friendly. So thanks, and I look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thank you very much for that presentation. I mean, we've seen the three facets that actually regulate the flow of people in the airport. You represented biometrics into the three of them at that stage. I have just a remark, and I think that your viewpoint is interesting because not only are you the CEO of these airports, these twin airports, you're also stemming from the innovation because you were first, if I remember properly, the CITO, the Chief Information and Technology, Innovation and Technology Officer. So you know exactly where you're coming from. So you probably were able to take the maximum benefits of introducing the technology. I have a question, if I may, and I would like first to encourage our attendees to also participate by just conveying questions that can be either addressed to each of the speakers or have generic questions that will be happy to take collectively at the end. But I have a specific questions because you alluded to the fact that there is, and it looks like important, there is still a lack of balance between the use of biometrics between domestic flights and international flights. And I just wonder, what is your way forward based on your technology wisdom of the way to approach that in the operations? Will you rely on existing or pre-existing registered travel program, the CLEAR and the other ones? What is the growth pattern? What is the transformation that you want to implement, introducing biometrics also in the next step of your domestic flights? Please, if you can respond to that.
Great question. And obviously, we're very dependent upon our federal partners, both Customs and Border Protection and the Transportation Security Administration, to work with them in this process. And we are having discussions with them. I know that TSA is working very hard and has a roadmap for looking into how they will further develop the use of biometrics in the process, and they're conducting a lot of trials to that end. And so we hope to collaborate very closely with them, help them to pilot the different technologies as we move forward. From our perspective, what we are trying to, what we kind of see as the future here is that people will, I mean, the key is enrollment, right? And the reason that we're able to do what we have done thus far is because CBP has all of the photos of international passengers and the travel information. And so there's an automatic enrollment there that can be leveraged. For domestic, we don't have that. And there are different ways you can do that, working with the state DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, potentially to get the biometrics from people who have driver's license or state identification cards. Or what we think is probably a better solution is that to allow people to enroll themselves through third parties that are regulated, if you will, by the government agencies, to say how they can set up such identity validation and verification solutions. And people would then enroll, create their own biometric solution, their own identity solution, and then provide consent and authorization for the companies that are holding their enrollment to give that data to TSA, to CBP, to the airlines, to all the different parts of their journey so that their biometric can be used to authenticate them throughout the passenger journey. So that's the solution that we think has probably the most beneficial and most successful opportunity to be implemented quickly. So we'll see how that progresses, but certainly that's something that we would push forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Justin. If I may just make a point here, I represent the EAB, which is a non-for-profit organization based on the fair use of informed stakeholders in the use of biometrics to actually promote a better expansion of the travelers community and the citizens moving from a place to another. And this is exactly where, for those of the attendees who are not from the United States, who probably know less about the power that CBP has provided to airports while receiving people from abroad, it is actually a power which is from remote ESTAs, in which you submit basically your passport data page, which gets or not accepted, that you can fly in. And once you fly in, biometrics get collected. That's why Justin is able to actually accelerate takeoff of the people from international flights. And here the question is exactly how do you actually build up an equivalent database of controlled biometrics or certified biometrics as your proposed solution that look interesting and probably the most likely to happen. I believe it's very important that our attendees realize that this is exactly the opposite approach that the Europeans have taken, by which in the United States, there is an enormous potential to have biometrics working in the background in the transparent mode, since the CBP provides the way to control as a black box for airport operators the validity of the biometrics, because it has to be the same guy that departs that was actually inbound as a traveler. And the limitation of not having US citizens exposed to that actually requests improvements in the way and transformation in the way you will handle domestic, which is probably to a larger extent devoted to US citizens themselves. Thank you very much for that interesting presentation. We'll probably have more questions to ask after we have more exposure to the topics by themselves. And I'd like to ask our next speaker, who is Maurice Jenkins, who is the Director of IT and Telecom at Miami-Dade, to give his presentation and the way they look in his part of the world at the operations and the contribution of biometrics as well. Maurice, the floor is yours as well. Maurice, if you are with me, you would like to unmute yourself, because we don't hear you at that stage.
Okay, start my video. All right, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Beautiful.
go ahead. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good evening. And I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. I want to continue to echo some of Justin's sentiments when we talk about biometrics and the effective use of leveraging biometrics within the aviation space. But in order to allude to some of that, I want to preface that with just a few numbers I want to share with you, just to build a little bit of the framework of the impact and I think the benefit of biometrics within the aviation or the air transport ecosystem. So within this first slide, there's three numbers I really would like for you to take away from this. It's the number 60, which is 60% of our international passengers who fly to Florida travel through MIA. And that's a large bulk of our passenger traffic from the international side. That gives us a reason why we look at the seamless travel and the passenger experience and how do we address that. The number 96, that says 96 is the percentage of passengers or visitors who visit Miami, but they arrive by air. So 96% of passengers or people who come to Miami to visit Miami come via air, no other transport mechanism, and this is the largest transport vehicle. And the number 46, in 2019, our passenger total measure in millions of passengers, unlike Justin, who far exceeds that. For us, given our strategic location in the region and being the gateway to Latin America and the Caribbean has allowed and afforded our numbers to grow pre-COVID-19. With that, however, I'd like to also add that in 2020 or post-COVID, as we're actually turning this corner and looking to get to some level of what we deem to be this new normal, a comparative contrast of looking at some recent numbers, and we have roughly 96,000 passengers on April the 26th of this year compared to 5,000 passengers back in 2020. So during this time period and the significant downturn, we had an opportunity to start to work on and evaluating more additional technology to layer on how can we actually work on bringing new innovation to the airport to enhance that experience, to add to the level of feel for the passenger and the traveling public to ensure that their reliance and their level of comfort. Am I not sharing my screen?
No, you are not.
No, you're not.
I thought it was shared. I apologize. It is right. Yeah. Are you seeing it now?
No, you are.
Okay, I apologize. So within there, during this time period, so we have this opportunity to actually work on examining additional levels of technology to build around our framework of what we currently had today to enhance the experience. We wanted more contactless solutions, more touchless solutions, just to work on passenger sentiment to ensure that the airport itself, as being that conduit for travel, is a safe, sanitized, secure place to allow you to transition through. So within that, we have the ability to talk a lot more about tech. We have the ability to talk more about resilience and the future of airports and how we can actually add an additional value within that framework. And with that, utilizing more and talking about the biometric framework.
Seems that we lost you, Maurice.
I'm here. It seems that my screen is not forwarding. Okay, there it is. Just wanted to share one thing which was quite surprising. Even though during the pandemic, our cargo volume increased more so than anything else, and it gave us the additional opportunity to also realize that some additional focus should also be placed on the cargo community and how we could actually work on value adding additional tech around that. So we're going to be exploring some additional value add, whether it's going to be engaging with biometrics or engaging with something we've been talking about, we haven't mentioned with blockchain and maybe integrating blockchain to biometrics. So, and that's some additional conversations, but I really want to preface a little bit about some of the driving factors and forces that's getting us to where our biometric framework is. And within that, I think, Jean, you alluded to earlier about what's going on in Europe and what we deal with within the US. And within biometrics and our ecosystem of our airport and the drive of what an airport supports and an ecosystem, not just an airport, but what we deem to be our catchment area and the areas surrounding that. And leveraging technology and the framework within the transportation sector, tying that within healthcare, because we've been talking about potentially for health passports and how we can actually do that and that level of integration is building a resilient community around tech and being more mobile and just looking at the whole community as a whole and building a framework around that as well. So we found that to be a key driving factor as moving innovation and moving business processes along. But when we talk about biometrics, so one of the things that came up originally, as Justin had alluded to earlier, was that CBP initiated the mandate, and that was years ago, requiring biometric exit as a requirement for international passengers leaving the country. But CBP initiated simplified arrival to make this process of coming into the US a lot more simpler than the processes that we've been dealing with over the last 5, 10, 15 years, filling out that customs declaration form and waiting in those long lines. But we found that CBP has been a great partner in working with airports and airlines, as well as cruise lines, to expand in the use of facial biometrics and leveraging biometric exit to just enhance the passenger experience. So they're the front line for what you see coming off of that 8, 9, 10, 12-hour flight. And we want that experience to be there, but at the same token, affording CBP the opportunity to be able to enhance and perform their law enforcement duties as well to ensure the safety of the traveling public and the safety of the airport. So within that, they came up and started using what's called facial comparison technology. And that became a very viable tool for them in doing their levels of checks and balances, as well as their level of customs enforcement. And with that, when we started the engagement process with them of getting what we call simplified arrival implemented in Miami, would be that the airport itself would start the process of creating our framework of working on what we deem to be biometric exit for the departure side. So within biometric entry with CBP and working with them and their technology, we started with 3 airlines, which was Virgin, BA, and TAP Portugal. We increased that to 13. And looking at the performance metrics, we were quite surprised that they were on average screening roughly 10 passengers per minute. And those of you who've traveled internationally, whether you're going into Europe or even coming into the US, you really would see that there's some really long lines. And it's streamlining that process alone is a significant benefit, significant level of improvement, and just by leveraging technology. And we realize now when we look at the framework of how we travel today, you're still conducting business almost similar to the way you were doing it back in the 60s and the 70s. So the biometric, the process itself in regards to biometric exit was we did it to improve the passenger experience, adapt to improve how each airline operates, keeping it simple for passengers, and also develop a clear set of KPIs. And we found that to be quite necessary as we looked in the evaluation process of creating our business model for biometric exit. So within the framework of what we initially kicked off in partnership with CBP, and they've been a great business partner in making this happen, we launched our initial trial with CETA back in 2019. And the first carrier, and I think Justin alluded to, in looking at a wide body aircraft, we did it with Lufthansa on their flights to Munich as well as to Frankfurt. CBP recorded and we matched that there was a 98% matching rate accuracy. And within that, the boarding time for a full A380 was roughly 28 minutes. The average biometric processing time was 2.7 seconds, only leveraging 2 lanes. In most airports, it's like 3, maybe 4 lanes, but 25 minutes, 2 lanes, and the level of accuracy to be that high revealed itself in regards to just doing the analysis. It's a strong value proposition. We found the same thing when we leveraged and started doing our trials with Virgin, and the same with Air France. So what did we get from this? On the passenger screening side, we had some additional takeaways. We had to inform the passengers themselves of how to approach the gate. We found that they didn't approach properly, they couldn't properly be read. So there was some additional training that needed to be done with staff. Positioning of the gates, believe it or not, was quite critical. And realize if you ever come to Miami and departing Miami, Some of our departure gates actually had direct sunlight. So within that also impacted camera view. So therefore the reconciliation process of the biometric portion did not work. Subsequently, we had to go ahead and put film on our windows to go ahead and dim the lights. And some of those little small minute things we didn't take into consideration. But if you're bidding on or competing on a tender or an RFP on that process of just looking at delivering business systems and turnkey, there were just a myriad of variables that needed to be taken into consideration. And we saw this in our lessons learned. Within that, the image capture range, we thought we could extend it to maybe 7, 8 feet, but we found optimization to be 4 to 6.5 feet, and allowed the process to be a lot more seamless in the integration and the movement of the passengers, and therefore it did not create a backlog within the queuing line. And then I think one of the things, Gene, I think will come from the UK side, there's also a legal and a privacy consideration. So the passenger does have the ability to opt out. If you don't want to do this, you can go through a manual process and get done. But from a seamless travel perspective, one of our major requirements also is not just reconciliation to ensure that you're going to reconcile against the Customs and Border Protection traveler verification system, but you also want to make sure that's also integrated into the carrier's local departure control system as well. So when you scan your biometrics, it also verifies that this is Maurice Jenkins. I am in seat X, Y, or Z, whether it's an exit row or not, and therefore it's only, you don't have to show a credential. It's just it's a full biometric to go end to end, and that's where that took us. We installed foot pads, and we saw there's some instances in where passengers traveling with small children ran into some issues, as also with baggage, as also passengers with restricted mobility when you're adding the gate. So holistically, when you are looking at this whole process and this entire concept, you need to take the entire journey and every passenger that may be flying into consideration when you're putting this process in place and you're putting these systems in place. So it's a great lessons learned for us. But one of the things that we realized that we've always touched based upon in regards to just training and additional value add is we need to have the ability to be able to create these end-to-end solutions, right? So we talk about biometric exit and for the international side of the house. If we're going to leverage technology, and I traditionally subscribe to 3 principles. If I'm going to leverage technology, it must enhance the passenger experience. If I can leverage that for the opportunity to generate revenue, it's a great value add. But if it can also improve business practices, so to speak, I want to be able to leverage that as well. So it meets that 3-tiered approach and adding value. So when we looked at biometric exit, we also said, why can't we do it domestically as well? So we wanted to trial that also and get out of the business of having that driver's license, having that ID, and having that boarding pass, and using that for domestic travel. We need to be that full integration end-to-end process of the passenger journey, whether you enroll one time and go from a privacy perspective, but from a business perspective, the traveler wants to be safe and secure. We want to ensure that passenger safety, ensure and give them the assurances we're protecting their data, but allowing them the opportunity to be able to have that travel experience and not have to worry about that cumbersome measure of checking in and having this piece of paper and walking around with this ID. Holistically, we need to transition to new levels of innovation within the marketplace. And I think biometric gets us there. You should be able to use that for entry into lounges. You should be able to use that for maybe purchases, queuing. All those need to change. And I think we're going to make that happen by a good collaboration with our stakeholders and our business partners and our regulatory bodies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maurice, for this very thorough presentation. It actually points at one of the questions that I had looking into the experience. I mean, what is the return that you see for biometrics in the passenger experience? You started describing some of it. Could you comment a little bit more about the real role of the future of biometrics? And just before you start, there has been a very valid question that I've put aside because it will not be answered by the next speaker, but it will actually makes even more sense after the next speaker. So for the attendees that had asked that question, I will retain it as the first one to be publicly opening the debate that we would like to have with you. But please, Maurice, meanwhile, just in a nutshell, is it a bright future? Is it a future that needs to be shared? What are the limits? And that will also be a milestone to our next conversation after Holger will deliver his presentation as well.
Gene, I think one of the things, and COVID-19 has afforded us the opportunity to accelerate so many processes that we've often talked about, we've often written about, and then all of a sudden it's been shelved, that has been taken off the shelf, and it has caused us to have more engagement and conversation with our business partners and our stakeholders. And with that, the advent of that has now created this additional push of like, innovation is here, and why are we not leveraging innovation? And within that innovation practice, it says it's not just, and it's no longer any, let's frame it in this perspective. It's no longer an individual entity's responsibility any longer. It's no longer an airport's responsibility. It's no longer an airline's responsibility. It's no longer a regulatory body or a law enforcement responsibility. It is our responsibility collectively in its totality to collaborate,
Yes.
or spend resources one time, not multiple times, to be able to effectuate good pilots, good proof of concepts, to see where innovation is going to take us. So if you're asking a question in regards to biometrics, I think the industry is long overdue for the next level of innovation that's going to move the business process and the passenger experience process along. And the advent of COVID, I think, afforded us to do so. There are more trials going on with biometrics, but now it's outside the box thinking. So CBP says, yes, a congressional mandate says we must be able to reconcile international passengers leaving. Fine. But now our question comes into play. If a passenger has been conducting business the same way for so long and it's become tedious, it's become cumbersome, and they've made this statement continually, when are we going to make that change? So now, passenger, we're going to allow you to conduct and control your journey. So you opt in and you give your biometric. Now, once you've done that at my airport or Justin's airport or any other airport, now I've checked in for my flight. I can go through security checkpoint. I'm able to link that to a credit card and maybe go and purchase food and beverage without having to exchange currency, given that we're still dealing with COVID and health issues, and then still get to my aircraft and board and continue to go. And when that journey is complete, that data goes away. So there should be no concern about privacy concerns anymore, and manage that data properly. But innovation is warranted to the point where I think we should be able to have a business process to move along and get us to where we need to be.
Thanks. I fully agree with you. I will actually put this in perspective in 1 or 2 sentences, because what you say is true for the stakeholders, but amongst the stakeholders is also the industry that is actually in the value chain that produces the biometric algorithm, the change in the progress. We'll shortly allude to it, but definitely the very encouraging values that we have seen reported by you, Maurice, and by you, Justin, before, are to some extent also due to the innovation that was brought inside of the biometrics technology itself. Deep convolutional networks, and actually the breakthrough that there was post 2015 was a key generator in improving the results, actually enabling the transformation of the performances of the face recognition systems up to a level that were absolutely unknown by a factor of 10, 5 years before. We'll discuss that in more details if you want to do that, but I think that needs to be said. The concerted effort is actually dealing and will be successful if all parties do that. So thank you very much, Maurice. We'll move on to the next and third presentation of the day by Holger Mattig on the achievements that were done. He is a Senior VP of Product Management in Airport IT at Amadeus. The floor is yours, Holger.
Okay, thank you, John. Hello, everyone. And before starting the sharing, let me just let me see how I can. Okay, oh, sorry for that. So before starting, let me quickly say what it means in terms of previous biometric experience here at Amadeus. So we started around 10 years ago to work with facial and iris biometric technology, and over the years we deployed our solution globally in New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, a couple of European airports. And in the last 2 years, actually, we delivered several of these biometric projects in the US that we have heard about, where we integrate with the Custom and Border Protection and Traveler Verification Service. And I'm sure you've seen our most recent announcement about the world's first OneID project at Narita Airport. And I will use this a couple of times now in my presentation as a reference. So let's first start with the typical characteristics that we find in biometric projects. We heard some of them from Maurice just now, but usually you have large number of passengers close to the cameras, which is challenging. Biometrics certainly must be integrated into the passenger journey and not separate. We heard about this as well. And the handling of exception is obviously very important to reduce the friction for passengers. There can always be something that goes wrong, and we need to have clear solutions for that. The continuous variation of lighting conditions, Maurice alluded to this. I actually don't see that the technology should not impose having UV screens or whatever. It should work in the conditions that you have, and we should challenge the technology rather than coming up with workarounds. So each airport has its own challenges, as we heard. They need to be specific solutions for those. And it was rightly said that there is a need to be able to work with multiple identity management platforms. The US is very specific. India, we'll hear from India in a couple of minutes for sure. The same, but in many countries over here in Europe and Asia, we don't have these sovereign databases and verification services, so we need to work with several other identity management platforms, and the solution, the end-to-end solution, has to support that. So interoperability is a key word here. So it needs to exist. It needs to fit the existing airline process. We don't want to do biometrics just for the sake of biometrics. It should not force any type of redesign or negatively impact the airline processes. It has to be end-to-end to really get the full power of biometrics out there. And still until today, we see many projects going into specific areas like the boarding, or some of them are backdrop. But the end-to-end element that we have delivered, for example, in the OneID project in Japan, is key, and this is where we need to be with this. And of course, the security and privacy requirements, they need to be designed in. So I now present a couple of examples how we address those characteristics, and the ideal end-to-end passenger biometric journey starts with the enrollment options. So to achieve a high number of passengers participating in the biometric journey, the enrollment option must be offered to passengers through the journey at any touch point, including mobile enrollment services. And that also includes, like it was mentioned before, the option for passengers to pair their permanent ID, which is out there, with a third-party vendor with their boarding pass, to use this throughout the journey. To provide a good passenger experience and to achieve the high enrollment numbers, the enrollment shall be done as one seamless transaction during check-in or backdrop or even at pre-security, and not with separate enrollment kiosks. We see this a lot, that airports trying to bring in extra equipment for enrollment. This is certainly not the way this should go. And it is important to mention that mobile enrollment for off-airport check-in and enrollment may need additional ID verification, which at the airports then also should become part of the seamless transaction. So going forward, you see here, I'm using an example here now from our project in Narita. So let's take a look at how enrollment as part of the seamless transaction works. Biometric identification typically requires 2 separate steps, but at Amadeus, we have reduced it into a single step. You see here an example of where the passenger or the person here is using the ANA check-in app. And here you see seamlessly during the check-in process, the person is now offered the enrollment, biometric enrollment. So obviously he can opt out, but in case here the passenger is doing the enrollment just seamlessly in the flow of the check-in process. And when the enrollment is done here, the kiosk continues with the check-in app, so the passenger can print the bag tag and gets the receipt and so on and so forth. So in the interest of time, I will quickly roll forwards, and you see here now how that biometric enrollment works out at the ICM backdrop that we installed there. So you see that the passenger is recognized biometrically at the backdrop, and then puts the bag there. And actually, with this process, we were able to really increase the efficiency at that step. And in our project, we see the efficiency gain there for the direct backdrops to be like from 50 seconds down to 20 seconds. So that's when you look at the kiosk itself and the backdrop unit. Another success criteria for biometric project is related to the importance of the high performance camera modules. We heard about the challenges on the lightning conditions and many people being around. So in both videos here, you see that our cameras are seamlessly integrated above the screens, and our biometric camera modules and software for image processing and facial capture can be built into every touch points. So the advantage with this approach is that we are able to roll out features to all touch points through the same camera module. So this really helps you to land biometrics according to your own scale and pace, and from there allows you to easily expand into many other projects, as it was mentioned here by my colleagues before. So this is important to really get into an end-to-end experience and really support the business case that is necessary to achieve around those biometrics implementation. So the high performance camera module is also critical to address other areas of concerns around liveliness checks, environmental challenges, and data privacy. It's easy to take a picture of a face, but that does not always deliver the quality required to achieve high matching success rates. To avoid such impacts on the biometric adoption, we are using, for example, a combination of 2D and 3D state-of-the-art biometric cameras for high resolution, real-time face capture, and automated quality assessment. This allows us to, using algorithms that analyze the 3D tracking trajectories for each passenger in the scene and spots differences should passengers, for example, stack when trying to onboard. So a lot of innovation here to adjust the biometrics to the airport condition. And it greatly reduces the need for reprocessing and agent involvement, for example, on the boarding process when you have this type of technology in place. In terms of lighting condition, the biometric camera is designed for the uncontrolled airport environment to support different lighting conditions, heights, skin tones, and as you see in the video on the right side, one element, how to address privacy concerns, for example, through background blurring. It is essential that the cameras are related software is able to detect any fraudulent behavior, such as imposter detection and spoofing, because it is important to say that not only documents can be fraud, can be wrong. It is also a digital token that can be created wrongly and can be used wrongly. So it is essential to get during the process quality into this that is really safe to use, and the technology detects any fraudulent behavior. So the third area quickly is to, and it was mentioned here before, the third area I would like to highlight is the importance of the airline integration. Unlike other providers in Amadeus, we don't rely on static boarding pass data downloaded like a day before the flight departure. Instead, we integrate with airline DCSs at every biometric touchpoint. I mentioned earlier the benefits of the validation of passenger bookings in the airline DCS as part of the enrollment. In addition, airline integration allows for embedded checks on flight updates like cancellation, gate changes, delays, and so on. to be part of the biometric process. This being in place, a passenger receives, for example, prompts at every service point from check-in to boarding, and reducing the need for agents to manage possible exceptions. And the other requirement, obviously, is in that the biometric solution must be able to work with different identity management platforms. We spoke about this before. This interoperability is key, for example, to process external IDs, permanent IDs, and to ensure the facilities continue to work as common use. A use case at the boarding, for example, is the boarding gate is used by an international flight using the sovereign identity provider, and then followed by a domestic flight that uses a local IMP at the airport. In airports, we are implementing biometrics into a very dynamic environment with requirements on flexible process flows and customization that support common use. Airlines and the airport want the user experience and branding based on their requirements. And all touch points must support multiple boarding modes for a flight. So you see here a couple of examples how our biometric devices perform context updates and change the layout and behavior based on those airline requirements. And finally, I'd like to mention the role of data to improve performance. Performance is key to provide a great passenger experience. In the example here from our biometric exit installation at Fort Lauderdale, the passenger's image is captured, the passenger's identity is verified against the CBP traveler verification service, and then matched against the booking to automatically board the passenger in the airline DCS. So 2 systems far away from the airport are queried and updated. When we install the system, it worked well from the technical point of view, and however a few passengers were using biometrics, passengers wearing masks were causing more than 2 matches requests per passengers, and the average boarding time per passenger was around 4 seconds. Through the data analytics of the transaction times and system behavior, we were then able to optimize the installation and achieve a boarding time for most passengers under 2 seconds. In addition to the performance optimization and ensuring speed and efficiency of the software, there are other essential steps. Maurice alluded to that or mentioned them partly. So steps that need to be done to achieve a great passenger experience and high adoption biometrics. Among them are an accurate camera capture range and angle, mask detection to identify passengers that approach the camera with a mask, so the hardware can prompt them to remove the mask for a couple of seconds to be able to for an image capture, sufficient sound to support the process, and icons that are visible and easy to understand. A successful biometric implementation also requires an early engagement with the airlines to agree in particular on boarding process. It needs a solid agent training and announcement about the biometric boarding so passengers are prepared. Animated instructional videos like the one you saw here, and certainly multi-language signage help to prepare passengers and support an efficient boarding experience. So that concludes my presentation. Thanks everyone for your attention, and John, over to you.
Thank you very much. We have accumulated a couple of questions from our audience, and I'll give them priorities as far as those questions are concerned. Let me try to access them. I'll start chronologically, and there was actually a question which I believe has been answered by our presenters. How are passengers enrolled on the face recognition for boarding gates? I believe unless you disagree with me, I believe that some of the processes have been even detailed during the presentations. So unless someone wants to add something, for example, to what Holger described in the short videos, I believe, I hope that the question that was asked has been actually answered. It was asked early that I kept it hoping that someone will actually pick it up, and it was picked up by default. Now, there is a next question that I'd like to address to whoever wants to pick it up. Let me just remind you that to the Q&A sessions, we're very glad to have Suresh Khadakbhavi, who is the Assistant Vice President Innovation Lab at Bangalore International Airport, who has a trove of experience in the same topics. And I of course, welcome him to participate to the answer to the next questions. So the next one that I'll read for you is as follows. Many people are trying to link biometric airport processes with the handling of digital COVID health at the stations. What is your view on that? Who wants to pick up the questions? Suresh, perhaps, if I may?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's. I mean, pertinent, or rather, it's important that all the travel-related documents, which is the travel data, the identity data, and the health pass data now should become one single sort of should be sent through one single sort of an ecosystem. And I think it is important that we establish that, and that should be the standards that we establish so that this can be shared in a seamless manner with multiple stakeholders.
Okay. Anyone disagrees or wants to add a comment? I'll have a.
I'd like to chime in one regard. To me, I don't think it's any different when you look at the comparison when we dealt with other pandemics in the past, in which you had to verify health credentials for entrance into some countries, especially when we dealt with SARS and other things in the past. The issue that I think that we're seeing today, and what's also popping up a lot, is we're seeing in some instances where people are out there selling fake health certificates. I see that people are out there selling fake COVID test results, which can be easily manufactured, so level of validity. So if an individual does have COVID or some other health condition, going into another country, you run the risk of, you want to maintain the travel ecosystem, because if we're not traveling, you're impacting our total ecosystem that was once moving 4 billion people globally, that went down to almost nothing in a single day and over a period of 1 year. And you don't want to do this. So to be able to have that and be able to say, I can open up my country, I can open up my state or my city to passenger travel. And this is what we need for our environment. It's something that can easily be done. But it goes back to, I think, what Justin alluded to earlier and what we've also said on this call. If we're not going to include the stakeholder collaboration aspect of it, whether it's the World Health Organization on one aspect, and talking about how do we secure the data, be it via one party or third party or neutral parties, just tying it to it, adding that to the process of just for the travel and then doing away with it, or digitally attaching it to the biometric that's on your passport, which could only be read by certain systems anyway. So you have other options and go from there. Now, from the passenger perspective, they always say, I'm concerned about my data privacy. And I could always raise the one fact that I've always seen, especially within the US and probably abroad, so many of us have the propensity, and if no one on this call or on this session has never gone online and used your credit card to purchase online, and you shared your credit card data, and I think that's more important than you sharing your biometric of your date of birth and whether you've had your health, your vaccination or not, something is wrong. It's for the validation for your safety. It would be something worthwhile looking at. And I think we're looking at evaluating that end-to-end process now with some stakeholders. So we're going to be evaluating that as well as an additional pilot.
Okay. Holger, any comment on that?
Yeah, there's certainly the problem at the moment is that in airports, we're losing a lot of the self-service capabilities because a lot of manual checks are required. So what we're doing, we're speaking with our airline customers to actually embed a widget into their airline app or check-in app to allow verification of all type of certificates, health certificates, be it vaccination or be it PCR tests or whatever, so that we offload a lot of these checks from the airport in the earlier stage of the process. For example, when they do their check-in at home. So actually that the information can be linked to, for example, the PNR or the DCS record. And with this, we will then be able to automate the checks again on the self-service equipment, and also allow pre-verification. So to really offload all of these manual checks from the airport, because it's just too much, and we're losing a lot of capacity with that. So that's what we're doing here. And yes, there are more databases coming, more integration that can be done, but at the moment we see a lot of this is still manual, and we're trying to help the airlines there with the widget that I just explained.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions, so I'll try to move quickly. There's actually the next question for Justin himself. And here's a question, Justin. Biometrics is growing. Assumed benefits are growing with tangible examples in industry. Return on investment to airport is not quite clear yet. As an airport that deployed this technology, what is your experience with biometrics return on investment? There's a similar question after that, so you can reply to two questions. Please, Justin.
Yeah, I know that this is a question that airports are grappling with, always have. You know, certainly, it's always been said that the benefits are seen from the airlines more than the airports, because it's potentially could allow the airlines to have fewer agents, and it's helping them board their aircraft faster and improve their operations. And that's all very true, but it also benefits the airport. We are, before the pandemic, our operations were really challenging the capacity of this airport. And so anything that we can do to make the customer experience better and the operations more efficient helps us as an airport, because we can then get more people through here in a much better service level than we otherwise could. And the more people that we can get through here, the more revenue we get from an airport and concessions and parking and other things. So it's not just an airline benefit, it's certainly an airport investment, because it allows us, number one, to make sure that our operations are more on time and more efficient, which allows us to optimize the capacity of our airport. And it helps our customers to be more, have a better, more pleasant experience and get through the queues faster, which allows them to then be in the concession areas and purchasing concessions instead of waiting in queues. And then from a security perspective, obviously identifying people through a biometric is better than having a person match a face to a picture. So operationally, customer experience wise, commercially, and safety wise, we think that there's a heavy return on investment for the airport. Yes, other people benefit as well, but we're happy to be able to make our partners more successful as well in their operations.
Thanks very much. A quick remark maybe from Suresh, who have got the experience of the national biometrics in India and that he put into operations. Would you concur with Justin's remark on the ROI?
Absolutely. I think there is a good deal of, I would say, benefit for all stakeholders, which is the airline, the airport, even the regulatory agencies. For everyone, there is a huge deal of benefit. But I think more than that, today, I think post the pandemic, I think it is also important to understand that perhaps this is the process which will make the whole journey of the passenger at the airport completely health risk free. And I think this is something which is very important, and it may become the hygiene factor going forward.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question, which is from another area. How would a touchless immigration for arrival passengers work if e-gates equipped with a scanner for passport ID verification were in operations? Maurice, Holger, who wants to take the question? Would you try this, Holger, first?
So my understanding of this question is not really related to biometrics. I think the question is how to use the passport scan and gates at immigration. And yeah, I mean, this we know is in place in many airports. Over here in Europe, I think you have the facilities installed in I would say most of the international airports. So I think this is very much depending country by country. The rules are different between the countries. We know that many of those solutions are really driven by government or the authorities on the government, and we have to look at this case by case. But yeah, of course, if technology like passport scan and e-gates, they can help reducing the manual process, and they are. And in cases like in India or in the US, where there is as we saw, a registration process, this can then be further, this stored biometric token can then be used further later in the journey of the traveler. And by the way, this is not only in the airport when there is an exit through a flight, international flight. It can also be in the future seen as a travel ID. So that travel ID could allow a check-in to the hotel. It can allow maybe buying some stuff in duty-free or whatever. So a biometric token doesn't necessarily mean a flight or an experience in the airport. From a traveler point of view, it's the entire experience, and that includes rental cars and hotels and anything else. And I think this is where we see this going. And through our traveler ID program, we have many requests also working with hotels and other stakeholders or contributors in the travel industry to ride on these services.
Maurice, I just wanted to have your opinion on the, well, assuming that the question would be, how would touchless biometrics immigration for arrival passengers? What about touchless or even other biometrics than face? Needed, useless?
Even within the US, because when you talk touchless or you talk contactless, and I think Holger hit the nail on the head, right? So you're doing that today when Customs and Border Protection is implementing simplified arrival, because when you come in, what they're doing is there's a facial comparison that's being done of the capture image against what their verification system is, and you're not doing any additional handoff engagement with your physical passport. But as Holger alluded to, it's beyond that. It's not just that entry portion, it's the whole entire journey that we have left off and that we need to actually truly look at. It is the rental car, it is the hotel, it is the car park, it is the whole entire business process that has been segmented and siloed for so long, but it comprises the passenger journey. And why is that not being tightly integrated to provide all of that information downstream, upstream and downstream, to make sure that end-to-end journey, that end-to-end process, then connected. So I believe a majority of that's already in place, especially that currently sits today.
Thanks. I have a next questions maybe for Suresh. Can you migrate to 3D facial recognition with artificial intelligence to reduce spoofing? If anyone else wants to pick that up, that's an interesting one too. But more technology than biometrics itself, in biometrics itself than in the rest of the operations.
Yeah, I can maybe take this. This is a very technical question, Suresh, if you allow me. So yeah, as you saw in my slides, this is exactly the difference in what the technology that we're using. Because when just working with 2D cameras or you know, trying to use iPads to capture a face, we exactly hit that problem. And so the solution out here was to really combine in that camera module 2D and 3D technology to actually then start to build algorithms that actually are much smarter and then allow for this type of proof to avoid any kind of fraud.
Yeah, in a nutshell, I also want to add the fact that the use of different wavelengths, for example, of near-infrared technology in capturing, also enables to actually detect what is called presentation attacks, which is actually spoofing by people using masks, heavy makeup or whatever. So that's particularly true. I agree with what Holger says. So the progress in terms of biometrics capacity to detect goes with new algorithm, the use of 3D, and also the use of extended near infrared to make sure that you can distinguish between a live tissue, for example, and a mask. Now let's move on to the next question, which was also related to COVID. What trusted party integrations do you foresee necessary in order to be able to validate biometric data, in particular health data, COVID vaccine tests, etc.? So trust party integration. Who wants to take that one? I can designate a volunteer.
Yeah, I can. If you want, it's again a technical question and integration. So first of all, health or vaccination certificates per se are not biometrical data, right? So you have a yes or no, or you have a certain information from a trusted source that you know you had COVID already, you have done your vaccination or a PCR test. So that is nowhere near a biometric token. So your biometric token is based on either your facial or iris or fingerprint. So what it requires is to actually link the biometric token and the information about your health status. And those will be in different databases, right? So we see this in Europe with the Green Pass. We know in India there is a database. Actually, in fact, Suresh asked me about this last week when we spoke. So the requirement here is to really start integrating those, and midterm you will have, let's say, through a process in the airport, 3 systems that you need to look at. And the first one is your DCS that contains all your travel information, passport information, APIS data, and so on. The second one is like in the US on the exit program, your traveler verification service that also allows you to say that person has left the country, but also provides the digital ID for verification, in this case face or facial. And then the third one is the health database, wherever that is and whoever that trusted provider is. But in my point of view, it can only be the government. I don't think there can be private companies that, or private companies as part of or have a mandate by a government. But the owner of this information at the end, in my view, will be the government, and those databases again will most probably country by country. So lots of integration again that is required, lots of middleware layers and stuff, but that's how it will be in the future, and that's what is required to come back to really automation and the self-service process.
Thank you. Just to inform it is actually the time we're supposed to close this session. With your permission, I'd like to ask our panelists and our audience to bear with us for another 10 minutes or so, because there are 2 or 3 more questions to complete, and I'd like to give a chance to each of the presenters to have his own personal conclusion before my very 1-minute wrap-up. If that's agreeable, here's the next question. Would you be able to explain how persons with disability would be processed? It might be a challenge for some in terms of biometrics, capture, etc. And how can we have unified international standard compliance for e-gates to support this group of passengers to have smooth flow? What is your experience in the airports, for example? Maybe Justin, if you have some with relation to passengers with reduced mobility, etc. There are standards. So how do they get modified, if any, by biometrics collection? Have you experienced something about that?
Yeah, so our solutions have all been up till now adjustable so that they can vary from the height of the capture of the biometric based upon people who might be in wheelchairs or have other types of disabilities. So we've been able to do that, and where we haven't, we always have an exception process, not only for passengers who can't get through the regular biometric gates, but for those who opt out as well. So you always have to have the option to have more traditional check-in, not using the e-gates. So that's how we've been dealing with it up until now.
Okay. Anyone else has a comments on passenger with reduced mobility? Maurice, from your experience in Miami?
One of the slides that I think I showed is something to take into consideration was PRM. And as Justin alluded to, having the ability to have adjustable cameras to be able to do the imagery, then ensuring when we do looking at the standards for the gates themselves to be able to support the widths of individuals in wheelchairs, so you don't have any issues with that. And also providing the opportunity to also opt out of not going through the e-gate or using the scanner and just going through the standard process itself. But realizing that passengers with restricted mobility do spend money, do buy plane tickets, do travel on aircraft, and as a level of significant spend, we have to take all of that into consideration. And I think we have, and when we issued our tender, but there could be additional work to be done, some more to be evaluated if there's additional concepts or innovation that's out there. Airports are always looking into that. I think we've even, not we have, but we have what we call ADA, in which we look at every business process out there for the traveling public, passengers with restricted mobility, how we can enhance the experience for their travel as well. But they want to have the ability to seamlessly move through and traverse through the airport.
Okay, here's the last question that we have so far. If there is one coming, I would be ready to take one after that, but otherwise we will close the session of the Q&A and come to conclusion and wrap up. Here's the last question. It is well known that the implementation of these technologies is beneficial for the airport, but have you considered how these biometric technologies could impact the jobs related to these activities? How do you see the impact on workers in both the short and the long term? And the question is to the airports operator with priority, as well as to Holger. So it's a general question. Who wants to start? I'd like to collect your opinion on that.
Justin, I'll start, and I think Justin,
okay.
Ideal as being the CEO, and because he did make mention, he looked at this as being more an airline-related issue than an airport-related issue. But one of the concepts, and I think we have, as airports have a fiduciary responsibility to do, is improve operational efficiency, mitigate costs, and provide the additional level of value-add services back out to the community as a whole and to the traveling public. So if we're looking to innovate or adding some new level of technology, and for me, if I add new technology, what I end up, if it and subsequently may displace an individual or a skill set, that skill set is then retrained to do something else. And that's what we call in regards when we look at succession planning on how we maintain the strength within our workforce. That's one. Two, from an innovation standpoint, and as our industry moves forward, there will be changes in airport operations and there will be changes in airline operations. And we have to be positioned to be able to support and do so, because we have to invest in that into our human capital. So the intent is not to get rid of your human capital, reapportion, retrain, utilize them as best as you possibly can. And I think the airlines have their business processes as well. So we don't dictate that, but from an innovation and in process improvement, some things just need to be done from an efficiency perspective. So therefore you can put more time and focus on energy on other aspects. So if I implemented biometrics today and it simplified the process, so if it took 3 agents to go ahead and load a flight and now you only need 2, maybe 1 agent and use them to work on more customer service initiatives, upgrade, standbys, passengers traveling with small children and pay more attention to them. You can do other things, but it depends on what the business concept and the business plan of that business entity is. It should not solely rest on the responsibility of the airport.
Justin, please, your contribution.
No, I mean, I think Maurice hit it right on the head. We actually did see that with the solutions that we implemented, and we didn't see the airlines cutting down the number of people that were working in the gate areas, but they were just doing more customer-friendly things. Instead of sitting behind a gate and checking scanning a boarding pass and looking at a passport, they were actually doing things, being more proactive with customers, helping them, improving the service overall. So it allows the airlines more time to spend doing customer-focused type activities. So that's exactly what we saw. And,
okay.
Exactly pursuant to what Maurice stated.
Thank you. It is time for a wrap up. I'm going to ask each of the 4 of you to give me 1 or 2 sentence maximum of what his view of the best or the worst or the most extreme contribution, hopefully positive, that biometrics has brought in the recent couple of years in the activities he's dealing with and in charge of. Let's start with our Indian representative, Suresh, please.
Well, I think
in 2 sentences, no more, just for people to have a takeaway from your part of the world and new domain of activity, which is airport innovation.
Right. I think biometrics brings in a lot of convenience to the passenger. It brings in a lot of ability to leverage data for tactical as well as for strategic purposes. And of course, it is health risk-free.
Right. Holger, please, a 2-sentence wrap up as far as Amadeus is concerned.
Yeah, I agree with Suresh. The passenger benefits quite a bit, but biometrics must be integrated into the passenger journey, not separate. And it really starts with seamless enrollment options at any touch point. If it doesn't fit the airline process, if it doesn't fit the passenger, if it is forced to redesign any processes, it won't work. So it has to be seamless.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be an end-to-end experience that goes beyond the airport into hotels and other areas where the passenger is going during the journey.
Okay, Maurice, a single.
COVID-19 has forced us to have the opportunity to properly collaborate and bring innovation to the marketplace a lot quicker. 2, bringing this innovation to the marketplace more expediently has afforded us the opportunity to actually grow and move our industry forward. And the key to that is going to be biometrics, and looking forward to the opportunity of enhancing and adding more proof of concepts to this venue.
Justin, would you agree as a CEO of Lava to that conclusion, or would yours be a bit different from your perspective?
I'm in full alignment. For us, biometrics is the future. Biometrics brings benefits to everybody in the entire process, from the airports to the airline to the customers to our federal agencies. It improves customer experience, and it makes the journey more healthy. It makes it more safe, more secure, and it makes it more operationally efficient. So there are really no downsides to implementation of biometrics.
Okay.
We need to implement them to make the travel journey healthier, safer, and more efficient, more pleasant.
Thank you. I'd like to add my own view representing the EAB, but I would sum it up in 3 words, actually 4: a can opener, a catalyst, and an equalizer. That's the role of biometrics. Now, we will very briefly explain this in 2 sentences. People always had a tendency to oppose or to contradict between seamless facilitation and security. I think today this is a story of the past. I think today what is really important is the role of can opener that biometrics bring, and that is security. The second role of the biometrics, from what I heard from you, is enhance flow facilitation. So by definition, there is no opposition between security and facilitation. It is totally complementary. And finally, and it was alluded by some of you during their presentation, the role of the third role, I said, can opener, catalyst, and equalizer. Equalizer because the right to dispose of and still control my biometrics is some personal right that I want to be preserved. So the equalizer means that from the onset of the use of biometrics and progressing, as most of you have reported, because that's what you had experienced, the rights of the passenger concerning privacy in particular need to be maintained. And that would be a conclusion as far as I'm concerned. I'd like to thank the roster of speakers. I'd like to thank particularly Suresh to the ad hoc addition and contribution. I'd like to thank the patience of our attendees, and I'd like to thank the organizers from Brussels Publishing on behalf of the EAB. We are really part of the game as you guys are. We are just here to make sure that people network, connect, learn, and keep progressing by using the right definitions of catalyst, can opener, and equalizer that I think is important that we all recognize. Thank you very much. And I'd like to bring the mic back to Holly and thank her again for her patience.
Thank you very much, Jean, and thank you very much to all of our panelists for such an interesting debate, and also to the audience for their patience and their questions. Make sure you do network with your fellow colleagues through the platform, because you can schedule meetings and even video calls with your fellow attendees there. If you do have any questions in particular for Amadeus, then head over to their exhibitor stand, where there will be someone on hand to answer any questions that you may have. But for now, stay tuned for the final pre-recorded session of day 1 from Eurofins, who we heard from right at the beginning of the day with our rapid testing panel. So make sure you stick around for that. But for now, join me in saying a massive thank you to our moderator and our panelists. It has been a fantastic first day and an absolute pleasure to host you. And I cannot wait to do it all again tomorrow. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Thank you, friends and
Bye-bye.
colleagues. Thank you very much.
All the best, Gene.